Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. I'm really thrilled to be with all of you tonight for a really special evening of poetry. The sky is on my sky. My sky is on my shoulders. A gathering of Palestinian poets. We are here with George Abraham, with Deema K. Shehabi, and with Lena Khalaf Tuffaha, all three amazing poets who you're going to get to know tonight. It seems like many people already may know some of you. There's a wonderful, warm vibe already happening in the chat. We hope that you'll continue to cheer on these three wonderful folks. We are going to welcome you to ask as many questions as you like. You can click this Ask a Question button in the bottom center of the screen at any point, and that will allow you to put your questions there, and then we'll get to them towards the end. You can also ask questions in the chat, and I'll move them over. I'm going to introduce everybody in alphabetical order. So first, George, who uses they or he pronouns, is a Palestinian American poet and writer from Jacksonville, Florida. Their debut collection, Birthright, from Button Poetry, won the Big Other Book Award and was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award in Bisexual Poetry. He is a board member for the Radius of Arab American Writers, RAWI, a recipient of fellowships from Kundiman and the Boston Foundation, and a winner of the 2017 College Union Poetry Slam Invitational's Best Poet title. Their work has appeared in the American Poetry Review, the Baffler, the Paris Review, the Missouri Review, Mizna, and elsewhere. A graduate of Swarthmore College and Harvard University, Abraham currently teaches at Emerson College and will be a Litowitz MFA and MA candidate at Northwestern University in the fall. So welcome, George. We are thrilled to have you here. Our next poet is Deema. Deema is the author of 13 Departures from the Moon and co-author with Bo Soleil of Al Mutanabi Street Starts Here from PM Press, for which she received the Northern California Book Award's NCBR Recognition Award. She is also the co-author of Diaspo Regna with Marilyn Hacker and the winner of the Nazim Hikmet Poetry Competition in 2018. Welcome, Deema. And finally, Lena is a poet, essayist, and translator. Her first book, Water and Salt, is from Red Hen Press, and it won the 2018 Washington State Book Award for Poetry. Her first chapbook, Arab in Newsland, won the 2016 Two Sylvias Press Prize. Her chapbook, Letters from the Interior, from Diode Press, is a finalist for the 2020 Jean Pedrick Chapbook Prize. We want to let you know that Zaina Alsous was going to be with us tonight, but she is a little under the weather, so we'll be bringing her into the room via poems read by these lovely folks. So just know that she's with us in spirit. We're sorry she's not able to be with us tonight, but we're so glad to be with all of you. So I am going to get out of the way and welcome Lena to start us off. Thank you all so much for being here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I want to start first by thanking our beloved sister, Ladan Osman, who invited us to have this reading, who made this gathering possible. So thank you so much, Ladan. I'm so grateful to you. I really miss home. So I'm just going to start by bringing some Arabic into the space. I'm going to just read a very brief excerpt from a Mahmoud Darwish poem. It's from a book of his I love entitled Hiya Ughniya, Hiya Ughniya. It's a song, it's a song. Just to kind of have that in your ear and in your heart as we enter the space together. وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَحْيَا قَلِيلًا لَا لِشَيْءٍ بَلْ لِنَرْحَلَ مِنْ جَدِيدٍ لا شيء من أسلافنا فينا ولكننا نريد بلاد قهوتنا الصباحية ونريد رائحة النباتات البدائية ونريد مدرسة خصوصية ونريد مقبرة خصوصية ونريد حرية في حجم جمجمة وأغنية. And so my very, very rough translation of these beautiful lines is, we want to live a little, not for anything other than to leave again. Nothing of our predecessors is in us. And yet we want the homeland of our morning coffee. We want the fragrance of primitive plants. We want a private school. We want a private cemetery. And we want freedom, the size of a skull and a song. That's from Mahmoud Darwish's poem entitled Nuzulun ala al-Bahr, and it's in this beautiful collection. So with that sort of tone setting, I'll start with a poem of mine, and then I'm going to share a poem of Zaina's, and we'll chat and read some other things. This poem was recently published in the Rumpus. Fragments from a Sudden Crescendo. At the gate of mercy, they are firing tear gas. They have pushed us back to re-envision landscape with an architecture of return. We gather our stones, have been told to wait. They have pushed us back with tear gas, stun grenades, stadium seating, torpor of eyes trained on us, dispatches filed in guileless verbs. Of mercy, singed and defiant, we remain preparing our breakfast as they fire tear gas, stun grenades, live ammunition. Gates crenellated, sky widening, sultans stir in their sleep, offer archways to lift nightmares from their brows. Museumed graves intone a call to prayer for the living. We perform our ablutions in tear gas, our limbs stun, our hearts grenaded, our wounds live, freedom, ammunition. The poem of Zaina's that I'll be sharing is from her beautiful collection, A Theory of Birds. This is the book. It is the winner of the Etel Adnan Poetry Series for the year 2019. It's a magnificent book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. The poem I've chosen to share with you is entitled Violence. We know the Nazis loved America. Hitler yearned to paint a twin, a green room where the dead are everywhere. Asked Abraham before the flame to the obedient tribe, what are these statues you cling to? Why calico? Why Spanish moss? Why the crickets scream? In a segregated graveyard, no stone reads private or public. The local jail is everywhere. Before another body is buried, a window is broken. A window was broken. The window is broken. In a high school history class, white children raised their eyebrows when I raised my voice. I don't know what they thought I was capable of. I wish I was more capable of it. So thinking of Zaina today and her beautiful voice, I think I'll read two short poems from my book, and then Deema and I are actually going to read a shared piece together, but I'll let her introduce it. So this poem is from my book, Water and Salt. I think a lot about children as a mom, and I think about how many of our children are never eulogized in Palestine. And so this poem began with that thought. Mountain Stone. Do not name your daughters Shema. Courage will march them into the bullet path of dictators. Do not name them Sundus. The garden of paradise calls out to its marigolds, gathers its green leaves up in its embrace. Do not name your children Malak or Ranim. Angels want the companionship of others like them. Their silvery wings trailing the filth of jail cells, the trill of their laughter, a call to prayer. Do not name your sons Hamza. Do not taunt the torturer's whip with promises of steadfastness. Do not name your sons Muhammad, Ahid, Zakaria, Ismail. They will become seashells, disappear in the sand. Do not name your children. Let them live nameless, seal their eyelids, and sell their voices to the nightingale. Do not name your children, and if you must, call them by what withstands this endless season of decay. Name them mountains, call them stone. I think I'll share the title poem of the book because it's a little bit of an antidote. You know, we shouldn't be eulogizing children. And one of the things that I'm so grateful for as a Palestinian is the daily lessons in perseverance in ways big and small that our culture offers us. Water and Salt is a poem that was written inspired by the 2014 prisoners strike. Prisoners in administrative detention across jails, Palestinian prisoners, went on a coordinated hunger strike to protest their unjust incarceration, and they subsisted on only water and salt. Behind the walls of your jails we wait, heartbeats audible now, muffled thuds above the current of blood running thin, indigo rivulets pulsing loud beneath parchment skin chafing and coarse like stone walls that surround us. We lie side to side. We hunger for what eating cannot feed. We carve out a sanctuary that no beating can tear down. No interrogation room scars can pierce. This is our ache. We decide how we live and if we die. We decide who gives and who takes away. We claim the freedom to turn stone into sunlight streaming through your jails, to sip water and salt like sacrament. Freedom to own our bodies and the land beneath them, to breathe the air on both sides of the wall. Freedom to wait and wait for your checkpoints and your watchtowers to be subsumed in a crashing wave of water and salt. You never saw it coming, this cleansing, how we have become this ocean. And I'll just pause there and invite Deema to introduce this shared piece that we'd love to share with you.
Thank you, Lena, for that incredible reading. I found myself choking up quite a few times. Lena invited me to respond to an anthology on the experience of birth. Was it last summer? Mm-hmm. I think it was last summer. And it quickly morphed into a response on the experience of birthing in the diaspora with all its ramifications. And it just took an organic form of an epistle. And tonight we will read from this letter to one another. And Lena once called it a thobe we embroider together, and I love that. And so this is for you, Lena, as well. Thank you for allowing me to embroider a thobe together. Dear Lena, this is called The Distance of a Sky. Dear Lena, what is longing? A moist faith, a sorrow shaped like a sister, an adulterated wish to merge with the cosmos like a giant redwood shooting into cobalt blue. I'm here in a small town next to a mountain in the Valley of the Moons. I am the woman with the rising belly lifting herself onto the hammock and swinging low. My eyes trace the silhouette of Mount St. Helen, recording her dents, her bubbling extremities, the paths of her pyroclastic flows. The land here gestures towards the sky with no fence in sight. It's the same way a certain cemetery where my loved one lies forces my eyes up, sequestering them in the air. It's late October, the earth nets scents of Jeffrey pine, evening primrose, California wood strawberry, Cleveland sage. I am swinging low. I hear murmur in the grass.
Dear Deema, at a dinner table passing a plate of smoky eggplant, we spoke of our children, their fledgling language. You likened it to music. When I speak of longing, the fragrances of unreachable cities rise up in me. So much of my American pregnancies are a study of imagined geographies. Here is what you might be feeling. Here are the new networks of veins growing inside of you. Here is a template for your birth plan. Here are the milestones. Here are the crossings. During my first pregnancy, my mother-in-law sent a loaf of sesame bread from Jerusalem, swaddled like a newborn for its ocean passage. And it is the one small as a sesame seed, the poet says of our homeland. Where I live now, there will never be checkpoints on my way to the hospital. In my plan, I write that our newborn must be placed in my arms for her father to whisper a first adhan in her ear. As I write, a new distance occurs to me. She was raised in a city of empty skies. Years after my first daughter is born, I meet a man who confesses that in his childhood, his parents never told him he was Palestinian. He is a newborn. I think now of the years spent carrying, the body become home. Some mornings I am capable of singing.
Mornings, we hoist our homeland onto our chests, though it hangs on us like a precipice. The news drapes over and annuls our joys, though certain conversations are buoyed by duality of being. The part who you see that I am in many ways could not exist without you, someone said. What we don't see is what comes to us. Once, as a child, I heard screaming through a window and thought a woman was giving birth. Later, I would find her dancing in a black dress embroidered with daisies, no evidence of labor. In a veranda swirling with tulip tiles, I danced with her, hoping the morning would never come. When my child was born, I told myself not to count the long hours and prayed the tether would release in the water of my dreams. In another story, I am the woman whose child arrives with no sound, leaving a little stone in my throat. That I would rise after birth was sometimes in doubt.
When my great-grandmother felt her first contractions, she was traveling with her husband, an Ottoman colonel. They were in Hebron when she delivered my grandmother Sarah, namesake of her birthplace. They stayed for a month before returning to their home. When my grandmother prepared to labor, she traveled home to Damascus. My mother carries the city of her birth, of her first month, in her American passport, relic of a world now inaccessible. In my birth preparation class, there is only one other woman who is not white. She looks over at me and smiles quietly. I am full of her silence. The instructor, a white woman who wants us to practice vocalizing. She encourages us to get in touch with the fierce animal of the self as we labor. She tells us this is what women in other cultures do. They intone their way through pain. I do not return her gaze. I am distracted by this anthropology. I cannot practice breathing with her voice in the room. The parts of me that are visible pass seamlessly from one estrangement to another. My friends come to visit in the hospital after each of my daughters is born, each friend cradling her own pregnant belly. Among my heirlooms are a set of 3 pictures like this: curve of a tender skull, visible in my arms, a ring of aunties around the hospital bed, their laughter softening the light. One friend's mother, eyes glittering mischievously, asks, "Finish Shabara." She reaches into her blouse and snaps off the tiny satin bow at the center of her bra. She pastes it onto my daughter's hair with a drop of shampoo. To nurture in this stillness, this lushness, in the predictable. This is what all the journeying parents seek. And what do our safe and sound children become? Let them be shapeless, without wounds. At the protests that thread the years together, we carry our children in our arms or on our bodies. We intone our way through pain. In my third pregnancy, I found myself wondering, which war will be yours, little one? Her eldest sister nursed as children skirted bullets on the street of Ramallah. The sister after her nestled inside me as the bombs fell on Baghdad. When will the parts of the self, dodging shrapnel in ancestral cities, become visible to you? Which rooms will you fill with silence? How old will you be when they come to think of your fierceness as animal?
Times and estrangement we have no control over. The hours unraveled from cities, women giving birth in a sudden blast, astrolabs without ships, trees falling with no witnesses in the forest. Who are we without grief? Dry lightning erupts over bone-parched hills and ignites 560 fires all at once. Sempervirens swallow the flames. You have to peek into their cavities to catch a glimpse of the inferno. We catch the ash on our fingertips and wait for the hours to desist. When our cities go down in front of our eyes, we cling to motherhood. It becomes our flag. When I cup my son's face into my palms, I renew my promise to the tether.
Thank you so much, Deema, and thank you. And now I'll just turn it over to Deema for her poems.
Thank you so much. And Lena, that was a beautiful reading. And it was so lovely reading this with you. It just it brought it to a whole different level for me. So thanks for that. I'm going to segue right into this poem by Zaina Alsous called On Longing, which I think really suits the theme here. And so this is a beautiful poem that just really, really spoke to me. Its images are just like sharp scalpels, and I just love them. On Longing by Zaina Alsous. An exaggeration that exaggerates. A smile that eats the mouth. Settlement or beloved, the hanged terranium. Want never comes without atonement. Even the fates must share an eye and a tooth while stroking Apollo's thread. Ask the Sufis how to find God, buried. Beneath the ink breath of otherwise, moaning is in circumference. Faith was easier before sex became involved. Who will touch me in the middle of this war? So I will read this poem, which is the title poem of my first full collection of poetry called 13 Departures from the Moon. And it's a series of vignettes which navigates a vanished landscape where the moon is the only constant. So 13 Departures from the Moon. 1. Whiter than memory, skeins of children in the pasture. Oh, the full moon rose over us, tiniest petal, a smile in their eyes. 2. He hears the anthem of moon-cadenced hills banging at the window panes. You're the name of what's in me of sleep, so dream. 3. Upon your return, you will descend through inlandscapes shorn of doorsteps and welcome mats, past towers of time and yarrow-colored soil. 4. Misshapen moonshawl on her sloped shoulders. Hush, she says, to quiet the chattering angel of tides. 5. Night of angel collisions at the foot of her bed, the smell of sugar and hair-ripped skin, the bride from Nablus writing her last letter. The moon grips her eyes as she looks up from the veranda where thistles grow. 6. Fields pecked ever so loosely by the sea. Ya Amar ana wiyak, O moon, you and I, companions since childhood, we loved our moon, you and I. 7. The dead here hang in mid-air until the moon breathes out. 8. Girls on swings rising higher in the air than knee-deep in the mud, one body splashed in the honeyed light of used-to-be playgrounds. Treacherous moon, fire in the eye of the sniper who yawns after his bullets dye the air. 9. Her voice belts your eyes that are bound for every grief. There are no boundaries between you and the moon. 10. Outside Nablus, a smokeless moon brushing the head of a padlocked mosque. 11. All these years, you and I, bereft of our bodies, we saw how the moon tethered our grave while the jinns extended their 3,000 hands upward, upward. 12. Pretend the jasmine between your fingers is the key to a sovereign house where only lovers of moon reside. 13. Find the belly of the olive tree that rests on the hillside between the well and the charcoal dust of that fallen mosque. There, if you look up through the silver green leaves, you'll find a bride and groom biting back at the moon. This poem was written in 2014. It's called Gaza Renga. And it was just stunning to me that the images and lament for Gaza continue and remain fundamentally unchanged, as though literally time stopped flowing. So this is Gaza Renga. From the underside of the bridge to where the Mediterranean sutures the land, one woman bronzes her arms, someone's limbs tucked into the lips of her long dress. She says, I saw the smoke. It was not the smoke of a gardenless earth, nor the hemorrhage of parentless children. This place is all we ever grieve for. Ineligible dreams, in passing hours, the daylight sealed from our eyes, and nothing is ever limbed. A baby on top of the mother's dried up corpse in broad daylight. The oil-stained boot prints are on the veil are the same ones on the wall, and the girl whose clothes are still smell like gas is replaced by another with a rough voice calling out, for what? To whom? Balconies, buildings, an ambulance with no driver settle in the back of her throat. I'm going to read a more a ghazal, which is always a joy to write because it always employs a refrain, a rhyme and refrain for the listener's pleasure. And it's more of a friendship poem, a love poem. And it's called A Lover's Quarrel with the World. But it's plural all over the world. Arabic lulls ageless in your matters most is temporal in this world. The sheikh with a gold pen in his pocket, the girl lathering her father's head with musk, and you purling over Whitman's poem, all have a lover's quarrel with the world. A riddle of childhood loss soaks the rearview mirror in an Arizona desert, and you drive past the unsaid, but ignite nothing immoral in this world. When you put your head down to grass and gaze at a fallen sparrow, your eyes met rest in its body, and what's silent became oral in the world. The child, splintered with too many voices, hears only yours, and her paths, dismantled of sound, light up murals of this world. A sweet theft, a heavy hour of grief, and a ghazal posturing for friendships that never fade, vine-leafed gardens where we hide against the perils of this world. Her face is a balm against fracture. The light on her moon is a cheek you return to, and time has no stride against her flushed lips, flickering corals of this world. How else to bundle this dark where pillow meets dream, and the one acquainted with the night rises like an immortal of this world. And I think I'll end there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Deema. It's always so amazing seeing Deema and seeing Lena read. We were talking before, it's always, me and Lena have had actually for kind of the first time in a long time, because of the pandemic, the ability to read together despite that we are across the coasts. And so it's great to read with some of my West Coast folks right now. I'm coming into y'all from the unceded lands of the Massachusetts peoples. And I'm actually going to start with a poem that requires me to share my screen. Okay, cool. Can everyone see, can we get in the chat, can everyone see the screen I'm sharing right now? Okay, great. Cool. So this is a poem in, I love the idea of poem making as tapestry, and kind of thinking about what Deema and Lena were just saying about a poem kind of becoming a thobe. And so this is a poem inspired by the kufiya, Palestinian, I'm actually wearing one right now conveniently, embroidery, and it is a cento actually, which is a poem comprised entirely of lines not written by me. And in this case, this is a cento written of lines entirely by other Palestinians, including Lena and Deema and Zaina. And so, into the lines of kufiya, we stitch our generations. Cento. What did I know of hunger, which moved my father's ocean, rising inch by inch? What did I know of hunger while you sleep, my father's ocean, rising inch by inch? This is object permanence. While you sleep, my father's ocean, rising inch by inch. This is object permanence. I have mustered enough tears to drown the shore of Tel Aviv. This is object permanence. While you sleep, enough tears to drown the shore of Tel Aviv. This is object permanence. While you sleep, my father's ocean to drown the shore of Tel Aviv. I have mustered enough tears confessing the number of days I have wanted love more than history. I have mustered enough tears to drown the number of days I have wanted love more than history. I have mustered enough tears to drown the shore of Tel Aviv. Love more than history, confessing the number of days I parted with my mother at the country of skin in the dream, confessing the number of days I have wanted love at the country of skin in the dream, confessing the number of days I have wanted love more than history of skin in the dream. I parted with my mother at the country of skin in the dream. I parted with my mother at the country, young again. It is spring in the greening valley. I parted with my mother at the country of skin again. It is spring in the greening valley. You are young again. It is spring in the greening valley. You are young again. God loves us. I swear, God loves us. You are young again. It is spring loves us. I swear, God loves us. I swear, God loves us. I swear, God loves us. 2 windows for the sea. I swear, God loves us. Open our tombs. 2 windows for the sea. I swear, God will open our tombs. 2 windows for the sea will open our tombs like history above the open page. Will open our tombs to windows above the open page. Will open, soaring like history above the open page. Soaring like history above the spine of the shore. Built myself in the sand. Soaring like history above the open shore. Built myself in the sand. Soaring like history. I danced along the spine of the shore. Built myself in the sand. I danced along the spine of no eye in ascension's presence. I danced along the spine of the shore. Built myself's presence. I become another no eye in ascension's presence. I become another no eye in ascension's presence. I fly transfigured. I don't walk. I fly transfigured. So that was a cento composed of lines written by other Palestinians, Noor Hindi, Hala Alien. The next line is Jess Abu Ghatta's Zaina Alsous. Then the next line is Deema. Then the next line is Lena. And then the next line is Fargo Tabeki. Then Fedi Judah. Naomi Shehabi. And then the next lines are Mahmoud Darwish and Tariq Luthan. So thank you all. I'm gonna next, in the spirit of kind of stitching togetherness in poetry, I want to read another poem by our sister Zaina Alsous that I kind of described to the others before. This poem made me feel like the world was ending in the best way. And I'll post it in the chat for folks to connect with Zaina's work. The workers love Palestine. The week before the Sun announced hospice, my great-great-great-great-grandchild, the harpist, announced, workers of the world, join the strike for guaranteed light. The Florists Union in Caracas and the Algerian weavers presented joint proposals towards illumination that multiplies bare hills, lakes of salt, sutured dim ruins shadowless of shipping yards and empires of memories of Sodden. The Children's Council listened in reeds of yellow iris, patterned leaves designating each role. Did you know that within attunement to effort, the end of monument resides? Then, the harpists, my progeny, that fate I had so long evaded, debt I owed to demographic warfare, and names sliced open, born in disfigured repetition, saying 300 years of returning. Language is merely the placeholder for what the land has always known. Species being is an observation of mom, preface, absent the wet painting of a raised village, sold, this land is land, land is land, 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 I am coming. Thank you all. So next, I'm actually going to read a prose section. So I'm going to read from Birthright now. That first poem was also actually from Birthright, the Kafia poem. But I'm going to read it's something that I think I overlook a little bit, that Birthright is very much a hybrid genre work. It's a poetry collection, but it has a lot of prose in it, and not just prose poems, but like memoir prose sections, recounting my, in retrospect, quite miraculous first trip back home to Palestine and the complications thereof. The beginning of my trip was tainted by hearing an Israeli say the phrase, pretty much engage with the rhetoric that all Palestinian right to exist on their land is, quote unquote, asking the state of Israel to commit suicide. And so that kind of has become a title for a series of interlinked mini essay fragments throughout the book, in which you do not ask the state of Israel to commit suicide. And the last one is titled "In which you cannot ask the state of Israel to commit suicide." What you have to understand about 1948 is they not only destroyed our village, they destroyed our lives. Yaqub's voice, crackling through the bus mic static, almost resembles your grandfather's. The way he'd pause, let Yani bridge the countries in his sentences. Yani, this is my home, my child, my paradise. The bus shifts left to exit. Hebrew signs painting the side of the road as you approach what remains of Lifta, mountainside speckled with stone remnants, structures half standing, swallowed by overgrowth. Your moments begin to blur. First, the descent, steep, as if the land itself is beckoning your return. Then, the runoff. You see a white man bathing in the desolate remains of a spring. Another Israeli man is reading a newspaper. He sits on a boulder as if he didn't know a house once stood there. This is the house where I grew up. That used to be the bakery downhill, Yaqub points onwards as the rest of the class lags behind. In the distance, a building gapes like God smashed their fists down its frame in a temper tantrum. As you near the hill's bottom, Yaqub points to the opposing hillside. That hill, Yani, that hill is where my father and his fathers were buried. The waste, Yani, sewage from Jerusalem runs down the hillside and erased his grave marker. You ask yourself, how many times has the state of Israel asked Palestinians to marvel at their own land's suicide? You reach the bottom. In the distance, there is a playground with newly renovated park, speckles of white children running around. The government started building a new quarter for Israelis at the base of our village. This is our land, but they want to pave over it. We are fighting them, in the courts, but the construction has already begun. On the way back, Yaqub points out a hybrid tree species that produces both almonds and berries. It is the result of decades of competition between an invasive species and a fruit gene indigenous to the region, two lineages intertwined, resisting erasure. Scientists say there are two likely outcomes to such speciation. Either one species will conquer the other, or another entirely new species will emerge over the generations. Yaqub calls it a genetic anomaly, a miracle of God. And so I read that out of a space of uncertainty. I consider myself lucky to have witnessed Lifta, to have seen Lifta. And last I've seen on social media, there is a resort built over the remains of Lifta. You can look it up on Instagram, actually. And there's been a lot of discourse about Lifta on social media. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to see it again. Matters a lot to me in the way that all Palestine matters a lot to me, but also especially because my grandparents are from Jerusalem and surrounding villages. And so I think that there's a particular pain in that. And we're literally witnessing ethnic cleansing in live real time. That poem prose excerpt was written, 4 years ago? And as of now, the thing that became a speculation of land building over land is real and it exists. So I wanted to read that piece out of just weight and mourning. Before I close, I'm going to read a poem from my friend Rasha Abdul Hadi's chapbook, Who is Owed Springtime. And I'm between two poems, and I decided I'm gonna read the title poem. Who is owed springtime, or that suspension of rain right before rain, the density of an uncoiled afternoon or morning or evening through which we could walk as a shimmering curtain of tinsel fringe hung at the door of a party and steer to another evening or morning or afternoon in which we are dancing, always, in which the uniforms have washed from our shoulders, along with them our deadlines, the deadliness, and after all that our dead are waiting for us with their best recipes and footwork. I think that poem made me do a double take because the entire poem is one long question, broken up through the lines, and so I encourage you to read it. I'm gonna end with a poem I don't usually read a lot. It's in some ways the oldest poem in the book. It ends with a section that I wrote a very long time ago and kind of inserted into Birthright by hodgepodging a bunch of them into a sonnet crown. This is a sonnet crown that is a full heroic 16 sonnets that are interlinked and comprises the midsection of the book. I'm gonna not read the full set, to be clear. I'm not gonna read 16 sonnets because we don't have that time. I'm gonna read an excerpt from them. Each of the 5 sections of the crown are spoken by a different speaker, so I'll denote that when that happens. 1, Miracle of Fire, Church of the Holy Sepulchre, 162 CE. The angels overlooking Jerusalem are weeping light rivers into goblets of wine and blood over the bodies split, casual, and made ritual of. The candle leaks itself alit. Transfiguration of molten flesh resisting night. In the sanctum, shapeless and bluing hues defy their plasmic origin, praying not to human spectra to redefine their optic censure. God's eye shining down upon his empty tomb. Come prayer light, come miracle, come flicker of hollow womb. Listen, the distinction between holy and heresy was always a question of fire. The distinction between whore and saint lies in who's burned for it. The distinction between martyr and false god lies in whose testimony is set ablaze. The distinction between Eden and exile lies in the tip of a sword on fire. My God, a resurrection always to end in flames. Holy, the fire refusing to burn. 2, brief histories of fire. Into an endless alley, we disappear and forget our reflections. Blame the fables, their brash amnesia. Mirror, mirror on the wall, whose country will be first to fall? Country, country in our hearts, wherein does your allegiance build contradiction? Where our roadways pebbles skirt like sesame from fresh sky, when the warmth of Saturday mornings can be held in our hands, or khubzeh dissolves the inflated plastic vapors and incense leaking into the air it inhabits. Sometimes our city prays without ever making a sound. A soldier peers into a vendor's stall and empties the air. A man bows to a crumbling wall, and he is everyone's god. In the old city, Tata's father punctures the throat of a persimmon, spilling light before asking permission to touch and become that holy. In America, Tata bites into the tiny sun in her palms, and there is no bloodshed. In this country, not even the fruit translates. In no country, the not fruit untranslates its blood shed into the bodiless lyric, that music without instrument. Somewhere, an unplucked lyre births a choir of angels from golden air. Somewhere, a poem demands nothing to make a song of. Instead, the poem demands outline. Instead of an outline, the corpse demands reliquaries and fills them too. Instead of each endless embodied night, may our every stolen town unghost. Instead of the net of kitchen scraps dangling above your head, it was the neighboring streets' silence that sang of decay. In Khalil, Arabic heavies the streets as the settlers from their heaven bombard the Arabic with newspapers, leftovers, sometimes acid, undissolved. The Hebrew graffiti reads, "Kill the Arabs, bold and right against the dark stone." The ghost outline of free bleached to its left. In this country, everything demands to be unwritten. 3. The apartheid RAWI writes your suicide note, a cento composed entirely of graffiti from the Israeli apartheid wall. In my previous life, I was human. With faith, I made a labyrinth of myself and burned. Forever I remained in existence, God of eyes unopened, no consciousness, just existence. Without, they told us, to exist is to resist. The Palestinian spirit is stronger than any country. You must riot to be heard. A lie. I cannot live. The truth being, we are all waiting for death. Hope is a territory I am ashamed to live in. How soon do we forget to open hearts at all costs? The hands that build can also tear through death and discover ashes of self, beauty, a mirror where senseless objects fail to reflect. Cut away the poisoned yesterdays. A country is not only what it does, but what it tolerates. I am ashamed to live in a world that built me. If there is to be a heaven, let it be the country I return to. Stone of hope in a mighty stream of ash and tears, Jesus wept for Jerusalem. Let me fall into those incomplete and familiar waters. I was better there. 4. Makam. Sunlight speaks to the children of exile. And to that land On earth, troubled, yet fallow, I sing praise to your rewritten and eroded topography. To hands that plow and seed a forgotten history, I sing praise to your calloused, unwounded exterior. To soil that cradles everything, even in betrayal, I sing praise to the weight you swallow and inhabit. I know somewhere the land sings love to his people, the way street cat howls to moonlight in lonesome gaze. Somewhere I kiss the Mediterranean and no one drowns at the intersection of salt and fury. Somewhere a patient God holds our universe with our tiny bodies ravaging in his arms. Somewhere our children wake up and become music, like Debke was another word for morning prayer, and Debke was not another word for mourning. How even in death, our people are always waking music, are always guttural melody thickening the air's hot empty, are always trespassers who dare dance on holy land, wine before watered, entered and emptied and transfigured us into communion backwards miracle. Ungodly magic, deity of backfired apocalypse. We tore down the earth and called it ceremony. And today I call us counterpoint, call us God swallowers, dissonance without sacrament, choir of unholy amnesia, of the waking damned, of graceless falsetto. It was our bones that split their fracturing hands, of second son, of rising Philistine in refusing collision. We are resurrected from God's lungs and burn and sing again. 5. Ascension. In refusing collision, we are resurrected from God's lungs and burning landscapes. Come eagle's clasp, come angel's palm. We've spent a lifetime searching for a light to bend towards and outright our names from every darkening trajectory. The ahwa grinds, coalescing and upturned. The cartographies of every palm arched and crossing bordered the countries into our hands. Yet our every writing of death is always a skyward hurl, an escape of wings and never a water-lilied lullaby, as if our heaven was not a golden-gated country, but a map not drawn in wall, with no waters to cross us. Here, without a need for bodies, we already survived that. Maybe God loved us so much he had to keep us in arm's reach, until the flowers don't demand our veins is honeyed nectar, until we don't have to craft divinity and mirrored tongues to survive and be worth surviving, until the angels of Jerusalem can look down upon us, in full bloom, weeping light. Thank you all.
Thank you, George. That was beautiful. I think we have time. I don't know if ER wants to jump in. We have time for some questions if folks have any in the audience. Otherwise, we're just very happy to be here with you.
So we don't have any questions yet from audience members. So if folks would like to go ahead and put them in the chat, we would love that. Just a lot of love in the chat so far. So feel free if you have questions. But I think, you've already given us this gift. So if y'all just have anything that you want to say to each other about your work, or anything that you would like us to know as the audience, that would be a great place to start, I think.
I think this is a great place to shout out some of the poetry from Palestine that isn't normally accessible to all of us. There's a beautiful series that the journal The Baffler is offering right now. So they're every week publishing Palestinian poets, living Palestinian poets who are writing today, who are being translated from the Arabic by Palestinian American poet and translator Fadi Jouda. So if you follow The Baffler on Twitter, and thank you for the link, George, really just an amazing wealth of voices previously unavailable to American readers. Are incredibly lucky to have that. And they're matching those poems with different artwork. So all of these are images from or most of them are images from the Palestinian Poster Archive. So it's just truly a beautiful window into Palestinian literature and art. So I invite everyone to check those out. And I think there are more coming. So it's like this ongoing series.
I also want to, I guess, just jump on that note and say, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about, as Don Mi Choi kind of posed translation as an anti-neo-colonial mode, and I think that it's really amazing when we see folks translating works by Palestinians and occupying space in the English canon. And I want to see more of this kind of work of like infiltration, I guess, I think, from Palestinians in America. I've been thinking about how like I move in the world and I can open space, I guess, for more Palestinians. That's kind of just been my like operating mode, like forever, but like especially nowadays. And yeah, so I guess more of like I want to become like a tiny terrorist of language in a way, and just like blow open space for all of us. And if I don't think poetry is worth doing if we're not doing that. And so I'm really grateful to Fadi for that example. With the Baffler. I also think that I really want to echo all of everyone's love for Zaina Alsous, because I think her poetry does that a lot, and her poetry teaches us ways to resist and returns us to so many people who have taught us the ways to resist. And I've been also sitting a lot with Sami Al-Qasim's work, and I've been sitting with the Enemy of the Sun Resistance Poetry Anthology. That's another one that I wish was more available and widespread. I obtained it through nefarious means, which is to say a PDF copy from the library. But yeah, I guess I'm just thinking more of like, it's just been such a weird and like hopeless time, maybe, is what I'm trying to say. And I've been just thinking ways we can collectively push everyone to do better, at least within our literary domain. And I just don't have perfect answers, but I'm really grateful for the work folks like Fadi are doing.
I think I'm glad you brought up Enemy of the Sun. It's been a pleasure for me, because I didn't grow up in the US mostly. It's been a pleasure for me to watch as this generation has discovered the long, rich history of correspondence and substantive and meaningful solidarity between Black and Palestinian communities fighting for liberation. You know, sometimes things on social media just look like moments, but in fact, there is such a rich tradition of correspondence. Enemy of the Sun is a great example of that, but that's just one snapshot, and so it's beautiful despite the hopelessness of a lot of what's happening around us, which I feel as well, George. It's been beautiful to see that those relationships deepened and reignited as we together resist the different and similar and connected forces that are, you know, trying to prevent us from living just our normal lives. And so that's been a site of great hope for me. Those natural connections between people in liberation movements that are meaningful and have been, but just are getting more and appropriate attention as they should. I see, did put that in the chat. Thank you, George. You're so fast. It would take me a long time to figure out how to get that. So thank you.
I posted in the chat. It's an interview on Greg Thomas's interview with Greg Thomas, who has done a traveling exhibition on Enemy of the Sun and how Black radical George Jackson in his prison cell, Enemy of the Sun, was actually found. And it's a poem by Zaina Alsous, but it was actually distributed and published through the Black Panthers newsletter under George Jackson's name. It's just really interesting to see this kind of prisoner solidarity emerging between Black folks in America and Palestinians in Palestine, that a poem completely written in a context of Palestine can be found in George Jackson's cell and can be oh no, this it can be mistaken for a poem that's published by a Black American in prison. And so I think that, it's a really great interview here by Professor Thomas, kind of talking about the different archival intersections of Black histories of radical literature and tradition and Palestinian histories of radical literature. I promise there are more in our history than just the expected names. I promise.
And there's also another sort of personal thing that I feel deeply is, in addition to surviving and not having our buildings bombed and our cities destroyed, Palestinians deserve art, they deserve beauty, and they deserve all of those sites of creativity, the real sort of deep meaning of life to exist and to thrive. So one of the things that happened recently is there was an attack on Dar Jased, which is a magnificent art collective that was founded by sisters Anne-Marie and Emily Jased. Anne-Marie Jased, of course, is a beloved Palestinian filmmaker, and Emily Jased is an artist. And they had renovated their ancestral home in Bethlehem, Dar Jased, and they made it into an artist collective. And that was attacked and very heavily damaged. And so if you follow Dar Jased, for example, on Instagram, you can learn more about how to support that space. Because those are really necessary sites of perseverance. Palestinians deserve not just to be fighting a war for their existence, but also to thrive and to live. And so for me, I want those things to exist side by side. I want to keep that front and center. So I invite you all just to visit and learn more about Dar Jased. Thank you, Firas, for including that. And then, if that's something you're able to support, of course, that's wonderful and deeply appreciated. But also just to learn about it and spread the word and be connected with the rich tradition of Palestinian art.
Can y'all share a little bit about how you stay connected to artists who are currently in Palestine when you are living here in the States, and how you kind of maintain that that dialogue?
Well, I stay in contact through various ways. I still have, a living and breathing family in both Gaza and Jerusalem, and amongst those are poets and lawyers and, and artists and judges. And so through them, I stay connected with what's going on in general in terms of Palestinian creativity and and indeed, not just aptitude, but for many Palestinians, the permission to narrate one's stories has always been at the heart of the struggle. But as also Lena mentions, that it's important not to always portray Palestinians in just as struggling or being constantly in that. We are, of course, struggling, and there's sumud, but it's also important not to give them to just place them on a platform where they're able to be presented as people who are living and breathing in art, in all their full forms of art and creativity. So, and love. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's one way I stay connected with people there. Mm-hmm.
As basic as my answer might be, Twitter honestly has been really I know a lot of I actually recently connected because of Lena and Fedi, recently connected with Maya Abu El Hayat on Twitter, who's now one of my favorite new poets ever. And it really is just for me a lot of Palestinians. The community is very tightly knit. We all talk. I think this is something people don't realize. A lot we talk to each other. We generally either know or know of each other. And I also kind of say this yes, to intimidate folks who've wronged us, that we know, and we talk to each other, and we know who supports us and who doesn't. And I want people to feel scared of that, if that applies to you. But also in that too, all of the pandemic has kind of taught me the weird necessity of social media, that I'm kind of addicted to it. All the negatives, and they're stealing our data and selling it, et cetera, and that is all needs to be deconstructed and completely abolished, in my opinion. But in the interim, the pandemic has kind of forced me to get comfortable virtually convening with people, and that has really opened my world up to so many more Palestinians. And I think that in the Twitter discourse, especially on Palestine, the reality is that a lot of the news that's actually coming from the ground in Palestine is breaking out from Palestinians on Twitter with their smartphones, taking pictures and videos. And so it really is so when I say Twitter, it is kind of a basic response, but it's also really important at the same time. And it is something that I think someone could post these links in the chat with there are so many lists of different Palestinians to follow on the ground who are actively reporting factual news and not censored propaganda, which is 99.9% of American coverage on Palestine.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that, George and Deema. I want to mention also that one of the voices that Americans are now more familiar with, but one of our young voices in Jerusalem who is putting himself on the line all the time, as is his sister, Mohammed al-Kurd, who's tweeting and reporting live from their home in Jerusalem, which is threatened with expulsion from their home. Mohammed has a book of poems coming out in English with Haymarket in the fall, I think. But if you visit Haymarket, I'm sure you can find the exact date and the pre-order link. And the book is entitled Rifqa, named after Mohammed's grandmother. And I'm really excited for that poetry debut. I think it will be incredible to read a young Palestinian in an American sort of voice, Palestinian American voice. I don't know about nationality. I'm just trying to describe a kind of a cultural location for the book. Especially now that all of us, the world stage, has seen Muhammad in this particular context of active resistance, of expulsion, and in many ways a leading voice on that. So that's something to look for. And another thing is there are several really incredible resources. None of them are perfect. I'm more interested in proliferation of great resources than having one perfect one. So in the before times, there used to be Palestine Festival of Literature, which would take prominent poets and writers and artists over to Palestine to meet with their counterparts and tour and see kind of firsthand what life is like for Palestinians and Palestinian artists. And many of our most beloved poets and writers have had the opportunity to go on that trip. And then this past winter, we had the first Palestine Writes, which was a festival of literature developed by many and led by novelist Susan Abul Hawa, who invited Palestinian writers from all over the world to gather online. It was supposed to be like a real live festival, but of course, COVID. And that was an incredible moment. And a lot of those beautiful sessions and conversations are archived on YouTube. So if you look at Palestine Writes, you'll find really rich and deep conversations by some of our most prominent living writers. So those are two places to sort of connect and learn more. For me, like Deema said, the connections, some of them are personal. We have family. I have family and my husband has family in Palestine, so we stay in touch. We're privileged to be able, through our American passports, to stay in touch that way. Not everyone has that privilege, unfortunately. I happen to have been I used to go to the same school that Anne-Marie Jasser went to in Saudi Arabia. We were middle schoolers together. That seems unfathomable right now, but just a weird coincidence of exile. So I've known Anne-Marie for a very, very long time, and it's amazing to watch her become the powerhouse filmmaker and artist and poet that she is. But you, in any prominent art space, quite frankly, around the world, you will find Palestinian artists, and it's just sort of being open to the work that they're doing.
Beautifully.
Thank you for sharing that list of books. I see you have a link here. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's another kind of thing. I'm always astounded. It's surprised in the best way by like Palestinians are everywhere. And tomorrow, our friend Rasha Abdul Hadi, who we've probably shouted out to death at this point, who's been with us in the comments the whole time, but to borrow their framing of Palestinian Southerners, my entire family, father's side of the family is based throughout all of the South. A lot of people in Jacksonville, Florida, a lot of people up in Alabama too, and all throughout. And so, I don't know. I think it's also, I would love to connect more and talk about like representations of Palestinians in Southern spaces. I think it's a really interesting intersection. And yeah, I always find Palestinians in the most surprising corners of the globe. And yeah, so I guess that's a note I want to end on, at least, is that it makes me happy.
I love that. And we always talk about Charis as being linked to the global South. And so that it makes me happy to think about that. So thank you all so much for this beautiful evening. As many have said in the chat, it's very uplifting, and just the connective tissue that you brought in from so many other people's voices and so many other poets. It's just it makes us feel like we are in the round with so many people who are all over the world right now. And so I'm just very grateful to you and grateful to everybody who joined us tonight. I want to encourage you to folks who are watching at home, please feel free to click this teal button that will take you to these folks' books. It's really important that we support their work when we are able. And you can support their work, of course, by buying their books, but you can also recommend that your public library purchase the books, that your school libraries purchase the books, so that more and more people can read them. And thank you so much to Lena, who organized this for us. that was such a gift at a time when we were really trying to think about how to show our support and our concern for what is happening in Palestine. This was such a treasure. So thank you to everyone for being with us tonight. I hope that you stay safe and well, and that eventually you'll get to physically come hang out with us at Charis in the real bookstore. But this has been lovely.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, the bookstore, and thank you, Laden.